the news that Ryan Mason has been sacked by West Bromwich Albion. It comes after a run of just 4 wins in 15 games, including, of course, 10 successive away losses. The last, of course, coming last night against Leicester City. I'm joined, as always, by the Ryan Mason to my Carlos Corberan. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
Well, I was just thinking the other day, Justin, how we haven't had many sackings this season in the Championship. The Premier League seemed to be hoarding them all of a sudden, but now we've finally had a dismissal after quite some time where we've had a lot of managers close to the edge. But this one's not really a surprise at all, is it?
No, obviously, the last one was Gary Rowell at Oxford, but we could have had several more. And like you said, Ryan Mason's sort of been perilously close to the edge for the past few weeks, but as you said, we've had Christmas. You can't sack a man over Christmas. So Ryan Mason maybe got away with the festive period. But as we've been discussing, the performances have been largely okay, but results have just been not good enough, and that's why ultimately Mason's been given the boot.
Yeah, we'll dive into that very shortly because we've got a lot to discuss over the next 20 minutes or so, ladies and gents. If you are watching this live stream, then first of all, hello. Please make sure you leave a comment and get involved in the conversation. We'll try to read out as many of your comments as we go through the show here today. First of all, we'll start off with a statement from West Brom regarding the sacking of Mason. They have said West Bromwich Albion have today parted company with men's first team head coach Ryan Mason. The club would like to place on record its thanks to Ryan and wishes him the very best for the future. First team coach James Morrison will oversee first team affairs on an interim basis until a new staff is appointed. Always good to see James Morrison involved in things, isn't it? We've got first comment here from Ben, who's an eager beaver today. He says, don't think there were many who were ever convinced by this appointment. Not surprised by this at all. Probably should have taken a leaf out of Watford's book and acted sooner. Yeah, as I say, leave a comment if you are watching this live. We'll try to read out as many as we can over the next 20 minutes or so. But yeah, I think we should start off, Justin, by thinking back to when this appointment was made, because I don't think there were many out there who were against this decision to bring Ryan Mason in. I think it was worth the risk. Of course, he was at Tottenham for a long time, and it always felt like it was going to go one way or another. And that's just the sort of risk you take when you appoint a manager who's never had an experience apart from being an interim coach at Spurs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the intriguing thing about this, and that's what makes me very curious. Is I wasn't bowled over by the appointment, but I also wasn't going to rubbish it either. And something that you always point out, and I think you pointed out at the time, that it's good to see young English coaches get an opportunity, or young coaches get an opportunity. But yeah, it wasn't exactly an exciting appointment, and I think that's sort of stemmed over the past few months. Is one thing I think Ryan Mason has lacked is a fair bit of charisma. Rich coming from me, I do realise the irony in that statement, but I'm not managing a football club. I don't have to have that responsibility. But with that, he's just started to play himself. It's not been very engaging at West Brom, and I think in a hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. Hindsight, if you look back, maybe West Brom needed a steadier hand, needed a more experienced hand, because what they're going through now is quite a significant transition after a really, really rough few years, and maybe it needed someone who's a little bit older than Ryan Mason and a little bit more experience.
Yeah, well, it's always worth bearing in mind that when Mason took charge of his first game, he was one of, not the youngest, I don't think, one of the youngest managers we've ever had in the Championship, because he's obviously his playing career was cut short. He's still early 30s. So it was always a big role for him, but he's been in the coaching setup at Spurs for many years up until that point, being assistant manager to Ange, having a couple of spells as the interim coach. So he was always very well thought of as a coach, and it was going to be interesting to see how he got on as a manager. Now, I think when it comes to appointments like this, where you're getting in a guy who doesn't have any managerial experience to their name apart from interim spells, it's always a gamble, isn't it? But you look at the coaches who have done very well over the years when they haven't had any managerial experience. Off the top of my head, Kieran McKenna, Steve Cooper, Danny Rule. There's probably loads of others who fit that mould as well. It's worth taking the chance, but sometimes it doesn't work out. And Ryan Mason, unfortunately, is going to fall under that bracket. at the start of the season, I mean, West Brom started pretty well in the first 5 games, if I recall correctly. But then the following 10 or so games after that, the football was bad. West Brom were terrible going forwards. They were particularly bad in terms of creating chances. And you could tell something was very, very wrong there. And results started to tail off after that. But then what we've seen in the last 10 or so games, Justin, is West Brom have actually been playing pretty well.
Yeah.
But the results just haven't reflected it. I mean, 4 wins in 15. They have 100% deserved to win more games in that time. Definitely deserved to win more than 10 away losses in a row would suggest on their travels. So that's why I do feel a degree of sympathy for Ryan Mason. And West Brom fans may not like hearing that because they've been calling for his head for a long time. But they have been playing all right recently and definitely should have scored a lot more than they have done. And the Leicester game last night was just a perfect example of that.
Yeah, well, something that I mentioned in the reaction yesterday was they've not been battered by a team yet this season. All the scorelines have been fairly close, and so have the games, really. And like you say, the performances that they've been putting in, I think over the last sort of 7 or 8 games especially, it's only yielded 2 wins, but they should have had significantly more results than that. A lot of losses in that time. And it should have been probably a few more draws and a few more wins. With that, we can sit here and say, yes, the performances have been good, but there are moments in games where you can look at in finer detail and go, okay, that's where it went wrong. I mean, yesterday's a good example in that Auna Hegebo goes off. West Brom are in the ascendancy at this point. Why not bring Daryl DK on as well? It felt like the game, in a sense, had drifted away as soon as Alex Mowat goes off as well. So there are key decisions that I think Ryan Mason over this time period has got wrong. Joe Wildsmith, Josh Griffiths, that situation as well. Yeah, Joe Wildsmith's save percentage is not very good. It's not very good. Josh Griffiths is a lot better, even though he has been making a few errors in lead up to him being dropped. That being said, I think a more experienced manager probably just persists with the right goalkeeper. But I wouldn't say there are problems. Something that I'm going to keep banging on about is this is a transition year for West Brom. You can tell with the recruitment, they lost a lot of key players in the summer, and that's probably set Ryan Mason back a little bit. But as I've said, when you're going through that, you probably need someone who's got experience of dealing with that sort of scenario before, and unfortunately, obviously, Ryan Mason hasn't.
Got another comment here from El Presidente. He said he had to be sacked. The performances weren't too bad, but he made some poor decisions and didn't inspire confidence in the team. And yeah, maybe he didn't make the right decisions at certain points, and his charisma may have been lacking in certain stages. But I just look at how West Brom have played for several weeks now, and he can't put the ball in the back of the net. Is the thing I would say. They have been carving out so many chances in so many games, but it ultimately comes down to the player in that moment who has the responsibility to score the goal when it's a great chance. And we saw that plenty of times last night. And yeah, goalkeeper situations, whatever, that's individual mistakes as well. So when it comes to Ryan Mason coaching this team into making them a side who are, mainly producing results. I mean, 9 times out of 10, if a team is producing more chances than the opposition, they will win games. But for some reason, Ryan Mason's West Brom side just haven't been able to do that for several games now. And that's unfortunately what's cost him his job. I mean, the away results are obviously terrible. I was making the stat last night that West Brom have now become the second team since the 2019-20 season to lose 10 games in a row on their travels, which is obviously terrible. And we've criticised Chris Davis plenty for Birmingham's away form this season, but Birmingham have been bad on their on the road for a long time. West Brom haven't been that bad, so it's a bit of a head scratcher. What's gone wrong at West Brom? Because I mean, Ryan Mason has, as I say, been coaching West Brom to good performances, but they've just not come off for whatever reason. And that's why I do feel a degree of sympathy, but we'll talk more about his future in a sec. Justin, what were you just about to say?
I was going to say, in certain aspects of this season, I think they are a little bit too one-dimensional. I mean, the reliance on Mikey Johnston creating was a big thing, and that spell that Auna Hegebo had where he was unstoppable for 7 or 8 games started to dry up a little bit. So I think there are certainly things that Ryan Mason could have improved upon, i.e., getting more out of the team in different areas. Set pieces started to become a thing later in his tenure, if you like. But as I say, I think there's probably an element of him not quite being the right fit, and also maybe not having as much confidence in himself. Like I said, if you've got a manager there who knows exactly what he wants from his team, you're going to rely less on one creative outlet, which was Johnson.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about West Brom and what could happen with the rest of their season very shortly. But first of all, if you are enjoying today's show, then thank you very much. But now is the perfect time to sign up to the second tier YouTube membership community, because for just £4.99 a month, you'll get custom emojis to use in these live streams and the comments section of every YouTube video. You'll also get access to the second tier Discord, where you can chat to us and loads of other Championship fans. And in addition to that, you'll get an exclusive video from us every single week. All you need to do is hit the join icon right next to the subscribe button to sign up now. So, look, we can agree to disagree on Ryan Mason and whether he should have been given more time or whatever, Justin. Let's focus on the future now, because West Brom, obviously, quite low down the table, a lot lower down the table than they would have expected. They're currently 18th, 10 points off the playoffs as things stand. So with that being said, do you still think West Brom can salvage this season? Because we're only just past the halfway stage. There's still a lot of games to go.
There is a lot of games to go, but I don't think this West Brom team was ever going to push for the top six. They're always in with a shout, because West Brom always seem to be within a shout of the playoffs in majority of the seasons they have played. But something that I've said repeatedly, and even in this show, they are transitioning this year. Recruitment's still got a little way to go. There's a new identity forming at the football club where they're buying low and selling high. They've spoke about that extensively. Isaac Price is a good example of that, even though his form has tailed off in recent months. But I think with that, that's something that you've got to consider in what West Brom do this season in terms of where they go as well for their next manager. I think they need a steady hand, which is probably frustrating for West Brom fans, because prior to Ryan Mason, all they've had is steady hands. Corberan, Steve Bruce, Valerian Ishmael. These are managers, I know to varying degrees, but it's never been expansive, technical-based football. It's always been structured, disciplined, hard to beat sort of thing. So I think that's probably the avenue they've got to go down again, just to really balance things out. And maybe the season can be salvaged, but a push for the top six, I think, has always been this season a distant want, if you like.
I think one of the things which we haven't mentioned, which really did hamper Ryan Mason and West Brom in general, is them selling Tom Fellows really late on in the window, because it appeared to me like they weren't expecting him to go, because I think he was sold maybe on deadline day or maybe the day before. And that was obviously a huge loss. They managed to get in Samuel Illing Jr., who hasn't pulled up many trees in a West Brom shirt so far, but isn't really the same player as Tom Fellows anyway. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. But when we're looking at West Brom going forwards this season, I do think they need to strengthen in a few areas, in attack being one of them. And if that does happen, then who knows where this season could go. If they manage to absolutely nail this appointment, then I don't think the top six is completely out of the question. I don't see them being in danger of going down. But, still a long way to go, and that's exactly what Steve says here. He says 20 games left, 60 points to play for, 10 points away from the playoffs. This season is so tight. Anyone can get in, even West Brom, if they go on a run. Happened with Coventry before. But the only way that's going to happen, Justin, is if they get this appointment right, which brings me on to this question from Nevsky. Who would you boys appoint? I'm just looking at the favourites with the bookies for the role. Michael Carrick is the bookie's favourite right now. I think he's going to be always amongst the favourites for pretty much every job until he eventually gets one of those jobs. Carlos Corberan, second favourite. Interesting. Still in the Valencia job as far as I'm aware, but there's been teetering there for quite some time. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Russell Martin, Gary O'Neill, Wolves to West Brom. It wouldn't be the most outrageous thing on earth. Whether West Brom fans would take to him, I'm not too sure. Any of those names tickle your pickle, Justin?
I mean, Michael Carrick's the first one that I would definitely jump for, but there's so much uncertainty with the Man United job at the moment. Gary O'Neill, again, is something that I would jump for, but obviously the Wolves connection isn't great. And again, because Liam Rosenior going to Chelsea, he's been touted as the Stragbour's Strasbourg replacement. So
Yeah.
again, that adds to that. It depends where West Brom are in the food chain. Again, they don't have a budget that they once had in this league. Obviously, if you go back to Slaven Bilic years, they're spending quite freely. Well, not freely, but they had a bigger budget than they have now. I think they need a steady hand. It's quite funny because it didn't work out last season, but Tony Mowbray would be an ideal interim period guy to come in and do the job, just to steady the ship and get everyone smiling again, because it's been a rough few months. But I think in terms of where they go next, it's really, really difficult to pick one out. I think if you wanted to be really ambitious, I might fancy Lee Carsley, but does he want to leave the England under 21 job? Probably not. So it's difficult. It's difficult. Michael Carrick and Carlos Corbin absolutely would be top of the list, definitely.
Yeah, you keep saying West Brom need a steady hand. I would only say they need a steady hand if they're in dire straits. And I don't think they are, to be honest.
It's not about being in dire straits, though. It's about coming in and getting results corrected and right. I don't think they're in any danger of going down. But as I've said, I think it's a really big point to make. It's a transition year. You've got to manage that transition, and with that, you need someone who's experienced to some degree. And again, with the football that West Brom have been playing over the years, it's got to be disciplined and structured as well. And again, with the lack of attacking players in that squad, you need someone who's probably a little bit more defensive minded than someone like Michael Carrick, for example.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the case. I think it is a transition season because West Brom, as you have alluded to, aren't blessed with the resources that many other Championship clubs have. They're not poor by any means, but they are having to go things a bit more cleverly, for the lack of a better term. So yeah, I think it is a transition season. I think that's why Ryan Mason was brought in as someone who was a bit of a roll of the dice, and they could try something new. And it's not worked out, performances, results, whatever. But they're 18th in the table. It's not worked out. So I think they need to go for someone who's a long-term option. How that looks, we'll see. We've got some suggestions from the viewers here on the live stream today. We've got Vinyl, who has suggested Tim Volter. I think that's very much tongue-in-cheek when we look at that. Dwayne has an interesting one. Is Will Still the perfect fit for this job? What do you think to that, Justin?
I don't think he is. I don't think there's enough players at West Brom who are technical enough to play the football he wants to play. Playing out from the back, for example, Nat Phillips. Come on, amongst others, Chris Mepham can get away with it, but I struggle with that. Additionally, Alex Mount's probably the only one who's a really good ball player in midfield, and even then, he probably lacks the profile needed for a Will Still style of play. So I would avoid that one. I really would. Like I said, I think it needs someone with a little bit more experience. I'm going to keep linking him with these things. Michael Scabala at Lincoln.
Are you his agent or something? Because you bring him up every single time. Yeah, Will Still. Look, I think Will Still, when it comes to every appointment, is basically my Michael Scabala in your case, because I think Will Still was very unfortunate to lose the Southampton job. I think there's more circumstances going on there than just who the manager was. So I think he'd be the perfect appointment for most Championship clubs. But I do agree to an extent with what you say, where maybe this West Brom side could do with being more technically gifted as opposed to, because it's quite a physical side, isn't it, this West Brom team? And I'm not sure that would necessarily suit Will Still down to a T, but I don't think it would be the worst appointment on earth. I mean, looking at the managers who we've just spoken about, then Carlos Corban is the standout one for me. If you can get him back, then great. Every West Brom fan would love that. Whether he would want to drop down to the Championship again, because I don't think a Premier League job is out of the question for him, even though he does look like he's about to lose his job at Valencia. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of talented managers out there who would, I think, would be good appointments for West Brom. But I'd be intrigued to see where they go next. I think a long-term option is where they do need to go, because, as I say, I think Ryan Mason was starting that and it's just not worked out. But I don't think that should mean they completely thrown the towel on going with someone in the long term.
Yeah, I think West Brom over the years, they've gone for managers who they feel they can get them up pretty quickly. And Ryan Mason's probably the first one who's not fit that bill. With Corberán, he was that steady ship in a really unsettled period for the club, which was absolutely necessary. But again, with the strategy that they're looking to go down, why are you buying players young and cheaper and trying to develop them and improve them, but also just buying with value? You probably need a manager who's got extensive experience of dealing with a squad and progressing them as well, and that probably rules out several managers.
I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think if West Brom went with someone who is similar mold to Ryan Mason, where it's his first job, I don't think that would be the worst case scenario. Because as we say, I don't think West Brom are going down this season. I can't foresee that happening unless something goes seriously wrong. So I don't think it would be the worst thing on earth to say, hey, that one didn't work, but let's gamble again and see if the next manager who we get can be a Kieran McKenna or a Danny Rule or Steve Cooper or whoever. Because I'm always a fan of going down that route. If you are a club like West Brom who don't look like they're... If West Brom don't finish in the top 6 this season, it's not the end of the world, is it? It's not like everyone was expecting that to happen, and it's a massive underachievement. So I think West Brom go for another gamble again. I don't think that's the worst thing on earth. But let's finish off the discussion here, Justin, by talking about what next for Ryan Mason, because obviously it's his first proper managerial job after his playing career was cut short, and it's not worked out. So is that his managerial career over with already?
Oh, potentially. I think there's a lot he needs to work on, but as we saw later on, ironically, in his spell at West Brom, the performances were picking up, and there was something of an identity starting to form. It just came too late, and results weren't there, and too much had gone past. So I think there is potential for him to dip back into a championship role should a club want to take the risk. But having gone as it has done for Ryan Mason, that risk then becomes greater, as I say, for a club in the Championship. Does he go the way Joe Edwards goes now? I.e., his first job at Millwall didn't go to plan at all. Goes back into the coaching scene. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because he's very highly rated. He's also a lovely human being. He's a really, really nice guy. Despite the Ryan Mason out chance last night, Ryan Mason was still praising the fans after the game. And I think that just speaks volumes of him. But as Jose Mourinho said, sometimes you have to be a bastard. You have to be.
Yeah. Sometimes you do, and he knows all about that, doesn't he? I think with Ryan Mason, it's got to be remembered, right? He was in a very comfy job at Spurs. Mm-hmm. He was probably going to be on the coaching staff there for a long time if he wanted to. He could have just stayed as the assistant. Even when Ange got sacked, he probably would have carried on being involved in some shape or form under Thomas Frank. So he didn't have to venture out and spread his wings and become a manager, but he wanted to. He's taken that chance, and it's not worked out for him. And I feel sorry for him, because not only because West Brom were actually playing all right, just not getting the results, but also because his playing career was cut short, and this was his chance to kind of, make good on what he missed out as a player, and it's just not happened for him. So that's why I do feel really sorry for him. If I was an owner, I'd look at how West Brom were playing in the final 10 games or so of his managerial career at West Brom and think, yeah, he's worth another go. But whether an owner is actually willing to take that chance, I don't know. Is he going to be willing to drop down to League One, possibly even League Two? No, not sure. Maybe he will go back to Spurs or have some other coaching role, because he's clearly got a lot about him as a coach, but as a manager, maybe that is it for him. And that'd be a real shame for all the reasons I've just suggested. But that's just how it goes, isn't it, Justin? We put out some polls for everyone watching on the YouTube live stream today. This first one is, who should West Brom appoint next? Michael Carrick, Russell Martin, Carlos Corberán, or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? Who would you go for out there, Justin?
Carlos Corberán.
Yeah, Corberán's the obvious one, isn't it? But Michael Carrick, I would not be surprised at all. 57% of people said Michael Carrick, 21% said Russell Martin, which Justin will be delighted about. 18% said Carlos Corberán, 4% said Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And the final question we put out to the listeners is, Ryan Mason's managerial career over already? Yes or no, Justin?
I think it is. I think he'll just go back into coaching. Very nice. Good job.
Yeah, I can't. If his managerial career isn't over yet, I struggle to see where he will land next. Or unfortunately, 76% of people said no, it's not over already. 24% said yes. If it's as simple as him just walking back into another job, then yeah, I'm sure it won't be over. But I'm not sure where that realistically will be unless someone really turns around and surprises us. So there you go, ladies and gents. This has been us reacting straight off the back of the news that Ryan Mason has been sacked by West Brom. We will, of course, be providing updates on who the next man at West Brom will be over the coming days or possibly even weeks. So we look forward to finding out who that will be. But we'll be back on Thursday with our halfway team of the season. In the Championship, we'll be picking out who's been the cream of the crop so far across the second tier. So we look forward to revealing that in due course. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
But Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for watching.